Hi, everybody, and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong Live. This is a new format that we're trying. With me are Jay Mckenzie and Karl Folk. My name is Griff Sombke. We're going to take some stuff that's going on in the news and talk about it. Basically, break out a few things, talk about what we're seeing, some ideas of where we think things are potentially going to go. And we're going to start today with the big news story of the day, which would be Elon Musk is now president. Elon basically is in charge. You think that's accurate, Carl?
I mean, we're definitely in deeply untreaded waters for us. It took, when I saw it last night, I had a very I was going to react one way, and I sat with it for a little bit. And honestly, it's a huge deal that Musk is essentially dictating how the government's going to function now without being a elected official in any capacity and having no real checks. He is an outside force, right? And
Right.
he believes he's an emperor. Like this is one of the things that goes with his whole kind of network state view from the top as the winner of the most coins, which makes you the biggest king.
Right. So let's talk about the specifics of how we figured out that Musk was king. We saw a continuing resolution come to Congress, come to the House of Representatives. It's a budget resolution that generally passes without a whole lot of fanfare unless somebody's feeling froggy about something. It was designed specifically to fund. Yeah, once upon a time. It was designed to fund the government through, when was it? Like the middle of the year, Jay? When were we talking about? How long was this?
I don't know. How long until we need to have another fight about this? It's always temporary, right?
Right. It's a continuing resolution. It's not a full budget. We don't have a full budget. We haven't had a full budget in forever. We have these continuing resolutions that we pass every so often so Congress can fight about things like this. And there was a deal worked out. Speaker Mike Johnson worked out a deal between Democrats and Republicans. Everything was pretty copacetic. And then Elon decides he doesn't like it. And next thing you know,
based on a tweet from Libs of TikTok, is that where it began?
About bioweapons.
Biolabs. And now it looks like they've just ended up cutting child cancer research. So that's what they did instead. And exactly. And this is just like that aside, the fact that the immediate response to the world's wealthiest man and a white supremacist and an avowed anti-democracy advocate, let's say, for him to be ruling by decree on his own public platform. Right now, there's nothing else like this on Earth right now.
Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Wow.
Literally.
Yeah,
well,
you're right.
He sent a tweet and then chaos ensued. And we had this, with Trump's first term, when there would be plans, there would be weeks of negotiation, things going back and forth, and then he sends one tweet and everything just goes out the window. Except now, it's not Trump doing it. And with Trump, they eventually got to the point in the first term where people said, well, just ignore his tweets. His tweets aren't official messages. It's just him musing on the toilet, essentially. Don't just ignore this. It's fine.
Seriously, but not literally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it, weirdly worked in really contrived, just strange sort of way that I thought we'd be done with, but we're clearly not. And now it's a different guy who isn't supposed to be the president, and yet he sends one tweet and everything kind of just goes nuts.
He is constitutionally ineligible to be president. He is not born here. Nobody disputes this. Where's the birth certificate? It says he was born in South Africa, and yet everybody jumps.
Yes. Oh yeah, no, and this is going to get really bizarre, right? Like this is a whole different level of power being displayed by Musk, and the opposite for the federal government. And whether or not Trump and his team trotted out their little message this evening, trying to basically say Trump isn't the one in charge, or Musk isn't the one in charge, it's Trump who's actually in charge. And it's we're starting to see narratives.
Yeah.
You do, but the damage is already done,
Heck?
right? Like the damage is already done, right? And so this is the part where we're seeing some parallels between both what's happening with Musk and Trump with the Luigi Mangione thing, where a narrative just can't stick right now. For whatever reason, we're in a very special place where the narratives that are normally applied don't seem to be working in a normal, cohesive fashion that we've understood them to. So, like, for me, as a sociologist, I'm sitting here just kind of across the board saying, well, this is going to be a wild ride that I don't think anyone really can fully understand yet.
Yeah, we're in uncharted waters here at this point. It's just
Deep
never
water.
quite been like this. I mean, the rich, the oligarchs in this country, which we have pretty much always had, have always had an outsized amount of power, especially when they would buy newspapers. We're talking about, the Hearst family. There have been plenty of cases kind of like this in history, but the idea that somebody's got enough money to buy essentially a real-time communication platform and then the Congress and the president and proceed to just write policy on the fly based on shit posts from
Yep.
libs of TikTok.
He's not hiding. He's not
No.
hiding. That was the thing.
Yeah.
The real power was always supposed to stay in the shadows and always be kind of obscure and uncertain, but there.
Yep.
And
Yep.
now he's just said, to hell with that, and here I am, and here's my tweet, and act, go, servants.
Yeah, do what I want.
Grab what
Come on,
I want.
do.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, and that is, I mean, there are very few times in American history where we've even seen remotely this, and seeing it this openly now, especially as people seem to be kind of putting two and two together that this is a heist.
Right.
It's really interesting to see, now how people are starting to actually react.
Are they just so confident in their ability to run things at this point that they're not even bothering to try and disguise it anymore? Why are they being so blatant about this now?
I mean, I think this is a short-sighted group of people, right? Like, these are people who have, yes, there are incredibly powerful entities involved with this, like Heritage Foundation or some of the other groups, but the actual presidency, like the executive branch right now, I don't think sees very far ahead of itself. And I think when you have a group of people who are reactionaries and who generally are conspiracy minded people, this isn't a crew that's thinking what happens after we do this, what happens if and when this happens, right? Like, there's this second and third order thinking that has to go on if you're actually going to try and hold power. And this country's huge, right?
Yes.
Like, it would be very hard for, let's say, the US military to take control of multiple US cities, as some of the conspiracy minded folks within the liberal circles and other places right now are talking about.
Yeah, no,
And
not
they're going to
happen.
try, and that's the thing. There may be no goal outside of chaos.
It really starts to go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we can deal with a couple of known entities and quantities here in terms of this dynamic between Trump and Elon. We know Trump cannot share the stage at all. He will not be number two. He will not be he will not be second fiddle. He will be the man in charge, get the most attention, and be noticed. But we also know that Elon just says stuff. He just says things. He says the Cybertruck is going to be bulletproof, and plenty of people believe him, and it's not true. He says all of these things, and then it's someone's job at Tesla or SpaceX, whichever company, boring company, and it's someone's job to try to make that happen, or at least make him think it happened so that he can look right, or at least not look stupid. But it's one thing to please one man who's on a constant ego trip. It's another to try to convince every Republican member of Congress to vote for something when it's asinine. What we're dealing with, like, something is going to have to give here, because Trump is not going to, he's not going to put up with these memes of Elon leading him around on a leash, right? We know that. He's not going to deal with that, but he can't just get rid of it, because essentially they've already said let's get rid of NASA. But why would we need NASA? We got SpaceX and all the money that's gone into it. So they can't just cut ties. But this isn't going to work.
No, it's going to get very interesting, I have a feeling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like, looking now at some of the stuff that's come out in the last, day or two, like about Musk not being given clearance, for example. Like at SpaceX, he does not have clearance to know what some of the projects they're doing are. And that was intentional by the board because it would mean that there's a review of certain other things that haven't gone on in his clearance procedures so far. And then, last night, I think, it was last night, he's, it's come out that he's being investigated for violating the terms of his top secret clearance. So I think that there's a whole bunch floating around right here, which tells me two things. Musk is absolutely in a place where I don't think any of us fully know the depth of what's going on with him.
Right.
But also, he does tend to say things. And that, coupled with Trump's tendency to say things, actually works really well. So I think there's going to be friction. I think there's a chance that we drive a wedge between them in an irreparable way at some point. But, at the moment, I don't know if Trump really cares that Musk is going to be the perceived face.
Right.
Because it might also, in Trump's mind, that's like a human shield. Well, that might be useful in the transactional way. I don't know. I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, how long is he ready to put up with that? It's a really great question of like who's really got the power here, who's got the whip hand, and is it the guy who's got all the money who essentially financed this thing back into the White House, or is it the guy who's actually in the White House? That's a really, really great question. I think all of these people would be just as happy with J.D. Vance as president as well, if that just happens to be something that's on the radar for them in the next while. It's not like he's got any real strong, deeply held opinions to get in the way of doing what they want.
Yeah.
So speaking of...
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No. Well, I was going to transition it.
Okay, so let's do it. That's 15 minutes.
All
let's
right.
do it.
Cool. Well, speaking of Trump and people that he's maybe mad at, maybe not, but definitely wants to send a message, stop talking about me. He's engaging yet again in some lawfare, and it's really hard to call that anything else at this point. He decided to file a lawsuit against ABC News recently for correctly reporting that he had been found criminally liable for rape. He didn't like this. He didn't like the way it was phrased, because I mean, who would, really? It's not something you ever want to be called. And he decided he wanted to sue them for this, and they decided to settle. They made a big fat donation to his inauguration, and they made a big fat donation to him, essentially. This is really right about the time depositions were about to happen. And it really strikes one as that he's just trying to intimidate people at this point. Jay, do you think that there's a bigger strategy here, or what's he doing?
Well, the most recent bit of news, which is, it's been 2 days now, was that Trump is also suing the pollster Ann Seltzer, who came out with a poll a few days before the election saying that Harris had a big
the Des Moines Register poll, right?
Yes. And she has already said that she's retiring from polling because, let's be honest, she got it wrong. She got it very wrong. But Trump is, of course, going much further with that and saying it's election interference, as if it's impossible to get a poll wrong, and we can't accept that. But it doesn't matter what she did. It doesn't matter that he won anyway. He should let it go. I mean, logically, you would think, who cares? Move on.
Yeah, he won. He won.
Right. But it's not really about that. It's about fear, intimidation. It's about a strategy that they're going to employ, which is going to mirror what has already happened in Hungary, which is a self-proclaimed illiberal democracy headed by Viktor Orban, which is a guy that a lot of his aides and advisors admire and look up to, and they see him as this great shining figure who's not quite authoritarian, or at least he claims not to be. But what he has done in Hungary is push out independent media, He has demonized George Soros as the cause of all the country's ills, and he's controlled the courts. And I think Trump and his aides know that they can do this, and know that a lot of people either aren't going to have the money or the will to fight them, or they're going to prevent people from going out on a limb and taking a chance, because they know this is coming, and they just don't want to deal with it. And I think it's starting with big names. It's starting with ABC. It's starting with Ann Seltzer. I think it will continue. It will probably, if they have their way, reach a point where they are suing individual creators, bloggers, anyone they can, to shut them up.
No, that's absolutely what's coming. And I think, Orban is a good example of the hybrid model that, Trump and these guys are in on. And there's a real chance they think they can pull off the larger shift fast enough that people won't push back. This country, though, is huge. And like the thing with Hungary, for example, is it's not a large landmass. Like, it's big, but it's not big.
Right.
And
right.
The ultimate flaw in the logic I think that they've employed is that, like, the right, Trump and Musk to some example have employed, it's flawed. And it's flawed in a way where they truly don't understand the outcomes at scale for doing this stuff. Because, yeah, there are going to be far less news sources pushing back, but the general consensus on the ground is already so against both Trump, but more importantly, against the thing that Musk, Trump, and corruption represent. And that, I don't know, that's a pretty hard force to actually overcome in a country that has as many people as we do, but also just distinct regional views of this. Because this is a bigger thing. Some of this is very incremental, like the stuff with Musk last night. But some of this is going to hit people like a ton of bricks, and it changes people's view of things very quickly.
Yeah, it definitely does. One thing I did see, it was an article by Josh Marshall in Talking Points Memo, and they talked about the idea of, at some point, we should establish a rapid response team to this kind of stuff, comprised of somebody with money and a bunch of lawyers who are prepared to fight back every time something like this happens, and fight back in the media. Because at least a large part of this is because they want the headlines. Trump wants the headlines. He wants like, we're going to do this. Think about how many times the Trump team said they were going to sue somebody and didn't. Anybody connected with Trump said they were going to sue somebody and never ended up doing it. It's a strategy of theirs to announce that they're thinking about or they're exploring a lawsuit, and pure intimidation. What if somebody actually decided to push back on that? What if that happened?
That's exactly right. I mean, we have to start actually pushing back, right? There
Mhm.
hasn't been any effort to actually push back any of this, whether it's Trump, whether it's Musk's threats. There have been a lot of fighting in court, but there's never been an effective rapid response team like that, that's ever really been deployed. It's what the SPLC and other things had been previously, but because of the way that funding has gone and, just generally with how outsized, someone like Musk's fiscal, power is, that's a lot harder. So I think it's worth every penny of that fight every time. A lot of the time they're going to fold.
I think it requires like a fundamental change in the way Democrats and Democratic funders think. It just hasn't.
No question.
Yeah, it hasn't gone that way.
No question.
And they haven't seen the value.
Yeah.
And will they?
I think, well, at some point when it comes for them, because it will eventually come for them, because it's eventually going to come for anybody who has something to say about him, and probably anybody who funds him or funds a candidate that's running against him. So the Democratic funders are going to get their chance to figure out how they feel about whether this would be useful or not, because really they're going to go after somebody like the Des Moines Register over a poll in an election he won, that's a message. That's the kind of thing you do to send a message that, like, we will get anybody who decides to cross us at this point.
Yeah. Be careful what tweet goes viral or video too many people watch or any meme we don't like. We're coming for you.
Well, yeah, they're trying to amp up the self-censorship, right? Like they're trying to get us as a population to do a lot of their work for them. Again, this country, we have a real mean streak of just doing whatever we want, which screws up the security state pretty thoroughly as is. So, I think they have fundamentally misunderstood the people. Maybe not at the institutional level, but I think they fundamentally misunderstood the people in this country because generally, like, I can tell you anecdotally from my experience recently with Republicans who voted for Trump this time round but weren't exactly stoked on it, let's say. They absolutely now are confused, one, why people are so upset about him, but two, the one that's coming up with all of them is, well, what do you mean he's not going to do A, B, or C? And, that's already starting to set in. And like this country has a pretty mean streak when fundamental promises are broken repeatedly, right? Like that's what got us partially into this mess is both parties' failure to actually enact meaningful change for people, right? So like if you're an authoritarian and you're going to rule by decree on social media and then have multiple different things happen as kind of part of the game plan, that's one thing. But when it's totally natural, plus a population that's increasingly not on board with everything that's being said because it's going to hurt them personally, financially, or in some other way, I don't know if they can control this thing if it really gets rocking. Like, there's a lot of chaos that this country has built up in its system.
Yeah.
That, like, we have a very interesting situation right now.
Well, we absolutely do.
I think one thing that seems pretty apparent to me is that Musk at this point believes he's invincible.
Yes.
And
if
history has taught us anything, it's that people who believe that tend to reach rather bad ends because in fact you're not invincible and you are human, and one way or another you're going to reach, it's either going to be, well, not providing funding for children's cancer research, or enough anger builds up, enough resentment builds up, gas prices keep going up, the grocery prices stay the same or keep rising and rising, whatever, collectively, as everything gets worse. And if the Luigi Mangione case has shown us anything, is that people they're on board for Trump if his chaos makes things better.
Right.
But they want something to change and change quickly. And I'm not sure how much patience there really is out there right now.
No.
That's kind of the other part of this. I don't know if people are willing to wait out really tough times for something that they need now.
Yeah. And Elon keeps promising economic pain. I mean, how many times has he said this in the last while? We're going to have economic pain. He's got his Doge commission with Ramaswamy where they are kicking out suggestions of things to cut. And everybody on that side is talking about, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. And this is the stuff that's going to get food riots started in some cases. I mean, we forget that the French Revolution, one of the big drivers was the cost of bread at some point.
Well, the other thing, too, is like you have to be able to pay your foot soldiers, right? Like if you're going to enact a wildly authoritarian vision for society and you have to be able to back that with force, you have to be able to pay those people. And it's simple math at a certain level. Like they're talking about cutting the entire Veterans Affairs side. You do that. That's literally, I mean, the bonus army comes to mind, right? Like you get really bizarre second and third order, things that happen. And they just don't seem to have seen any of them.
Right.
Well, they're so mad about FDR and the safety net.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it was a safety net that he created, but what did Mark Andreessen call it? We're living in the shadow of FDR's.
Yeah, the shadow of FDR's New Deal, and it's like, well, yes, because at one point this was what.
Well, people don't remember who came before FDR, and that was Hoover. And one of the big things that people can think about now is Hooverville, which was the World War I vets who weren't getting paid because Hoover wouldn't pay them, and they set up a tent camp in D.C. outside the White House demanding to be paid. And that or something like it is going to happen if you don't feed people.
It's about the only thing anyone remembers about Herbert Hoover, to be honest. It's about the only lasting legacy the man seems to have had, is the idea that the homeless camps that sprung up during the Great Depression were known as Hoovervilles. And it's just great. This is where we are now. And to what you said about Luigi Mangione, for those of you who have been living in a cave for the last few weeks or whatever, the CEO of United Healthcare, enormous healthcare company, Brian Thompson, was shot on a New York City sidewalk by an unknown attacker who was later identified as a gentleman named Luigi Mangione. And he has essentially become a folk hero. He wrote on his bullets, deny, depose, and defend, which are 3 strategies that the health insurance industry has used to deny claims over the years. He left a backpack full of Monopoly money for the cops to find. The guy is ridiculously good looking. He has turned into this cause célèbre, and he has been finally charged officially. And today, the feds got in on the act and charged him as well. But he's looking at terrorism charges now. They absolutely are terrified of this guy and what he has done. NBC News has this, and they're charging him now with 2 counts of second-degree murder, one of which is charged as a killing in the act of terrorism. And DA Alvin Bragg of New York called this a brazen, targeted, and premeditated shooting. He added terrorism charges were warranted because the slaying was intended to evoke terror. Well, are CEOs a protected class now, I guess, is the question, because I think that the average person on the street doesn't really have a whole lot to worry about with this guy. This isn't...
One thing I would say, looking at this case, is he has been the main character on the internet for like 2 weeks now. And when is the last time that happened with anyone or anything that, like even Barbenheimer, which is the closest thing I can think of in the last 5 years, it wasn't this long and it wasn't this pervasive. And the feelings, it was a fun meme and a couple movies that people liked, but it didn't hit deeper than that. And this is stuck on people's minds and on the tip of everybody's tongue. And that cannot be faked. That is real, that is genuine, and it speaks to a lot of issues that we're not dealing with in this country, and that's why it won't go away, and that's what scares people.
Right. And they've already charged one woman in Florida for using the words deny, depose, and defend on the phone with her insurance company, saying she'd see them soon and hanging up, and they are charging her with making terroristic threats as a result of that. They rolled him back into court today. They perp walked him off the plane from Pennsylvania, and they have a small army behind him, including, the New York mayor got himself into that shot. And it looked like nothing so much as the crowd that was around Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, when he was brought to his trial, where like one guy set off a bomb causing the most destructive act of domestic terror in United States history, killed 168 people. They're treating him like this, exactly like this.
They've screwed up, right? Like by treating him at like literally super villain status, right? They're giving his story way more power. And in the US, we like a good anti-hero. We like the Joker. We like the pretty boy Floyds.
Mm-hmm.
And, like a couple of the photos that came out tonight, they look like shots out of a Nolan film. They don't look like,
Absolutely.
we're seeing the theater of power right now, right? And when you've got something as defining as this is going to end up being across the board, because we're talking about redefining terrorism to mean a wealthy person in a targeted attack now is terrorism akin to the Oklahoma City bombing. And that, again, is only going to highlight the problem that this guy originally put a spotlight on by assassinating a CEO, because it shows, again, the classes get different access and they get different support from the state. And, you put that together, those photos, that extra charging is a terrorist, and then the
backup federal charges waiting in case for some reason they blow it at the state level.
right. And there's a pretty high chance that they have a heck of a time getting a jury to convict this guy.
Oh yeah.
For a number of reasons, right? Like that terrorism charge is a much harder charge to actually get than anything else. And them saying, and him saying apparently that it was a targeted thing and that he didn't want to use a bomb because that would hurt other people. You're gonna have a hard time proving a case that says you're a terrorist as the law stands. So that, that tells me that this is incredibly powerful.
The man is on the record well before this happened as criticizing Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, because innocent people got killed.
Exactly.
When Ted Kaczynski was sending out bombs. And, he basically put that into action. It's really hard to make an argument that this guy is a terrorist. It's just, if this is a terrorist attack, then we really have to rethink a lot of our priors about what constitutes a terrorist attack, again, in this country.
And it really outlines, again, like the dramatic shift in power that we're seeing and have seen, right? Like Trump's partially a driver and a symptom of it. So, like, this is a whole bigger stew pot of things floating around right now than I think a lot of people have realized. And like this, again, it's going to get reflected with Musk and Trump and the billionaire cabinet, right? Like they're just going to be reflections of this thing now forever.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do we walk this thing?
Well, I was going to say that, what we seem to be seeing in all of these topics and over again is that there are real issues, real problems, and the answer from the powers that be seems to be doubling down and go harder and more punishment and more censorship. And the other United Healthcare CEO coming out with that statement a day later, essentially saying, we're going to keep doing what we do. And back to normal, back to square one. And then you see Musk saying that, well, Brian Thompson had a duty to his shareholders, no matter how. No matter
how horrible or immoral you find it, he had to do this for the shareholders.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we must
a whole new world
of
power.
Yeah, this is wow, you said that out loud. We knew you thought
but
you said it out loud.
It's worked to this point. Threats and intimidation, and let's tack on some terrorism charges, and let's go sue this person, let's make them settle, let's do all of this. And okay, it's worked, but it does seem like we're reaching a point where people are just fed up. Or honestly, at a certain point, things aren't getting better. Things aren't improving. Nobody has the answer. And just saying, well, the threat of consequences doesn't really work if you don't have food, if you can't pay for your cancer treatment.
Right. Yep.
If you can't live, what does it matter? You're going to send me to jail?
Exactly.
And we're running into that more and more often, where people are starting to realize that, like, there is no stick that's big enough to hit you with to make it worse than what you're already facing. We're getting an entire class of people that just don't feel like they have anything to lose as a result of their status right now. And this is terrifying because it's going to go in directions that nobody can really predict right now. This guy, the media is calling this guy a Marxist. I mean, the right-wing media, the New York Post, let me quote this because it's beautiful. It's just so New York Post, such a New York Post thing to say here. Since his arrest, Mangione has garnered a cult-like following of sympathetic radicals enamored by his matinee idol appearance and Marxist leanings. Like, no, this guy is not a Marxist. He expressed opposition to diversity, equality, and inclusion initiatives. He praised Tucker Carlson as having brilliant insights. He followed RFK Jr. Where's the Marxism? This is I don't see it. I'm no expert on any of this, but I don't see any Marx in this whatsoever.
Well, they wanted to call him trans, except they saw pictures of him shirtless and said, that's not going to work.
Nope. Yeah, the shirtless pictures are just going to make this worse. You can't take the shirtless pictures at this point.
No, some of the things I've seen online, truly, about Luigi, some of the most unhinged stuff I've ever seen. The most unhinged stuff, and you know what? This doesn't go back in the bottle. None of this energy goes back in the bottle. It's really, I just don't see them winning this one.
No.
Like, at this point, the power has become his action was the power, right? And so people agreed to the point where, like, you got 41% of, the country under the age of, like, 40 on board with this. That's unbelievable. It's so little that we agree on at that kind of level. It's the only thing I can think of that's outstripped it is burning down a police station and having an uprising here.
Right.
In 2020. Like, that pulled higher than this, but this is a close second. It says something very dark about where we're sitting and where that goes, right? Like you said, at some point people have nothing else to lose. And
we talked about this on the podcast this week, but Anthem Healthcare, another big health insurance company, was having a beef with the anesthesiologists, and they decided to announce the very day that Luigi did this, if he did it, that they were going to cut the rate that they were paying anesthesiologists, and it would work out to only paying for 45 minutes of anesthesia for a 1-hour surgery. Right. They walked that back the very next day, saying, it hadn't been vetted. It was a statement that just got released. It was a draft. And we had another company, Alliance, drop medical bills for hundreds of people, medical debt that they were in. It's almost like this guy got them just completely spooked. And the corporations have kind of shown you by their behavior that this actually makes them move. This actually makes them do things. If they didn't, they wouldn't be doing this.
And look, all disclaimers out there, right? Violence is bad. Yes, violence is bad. We don't condone violence. But you know what else is bad? Is living in a dystopian hellscape. And by the reaction we have seen from people online and in the real world after this attack, people seem to increasingly think they are in a dystopian hellscape. Things will not get better. And when the CEOs and the billionaires and the Trumps and the Musks say, take it on the chin, it's fine, what's your problem? What do you think people are going to do? If people are fed up and you're telling them, we're not going to do anything different, deal with it. Hard times are coming.
Yep. Hard times make strong men, guys. Come on.
Well, and that's it, right? Like, they truly believe in social Darwinism, right? So, like, chaos, they feel that social chaos would help them, right? Because then the strong men would get lifted out of the mire of hell.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing we know is that's just not how this works in the real world.
No, not at all.
And so, like, that inherently, like, it takes some of the power away from them. Like, I can't help but keep thinking over and over again, what we're actually seeing is elite panic. What we're seeing is the wealth class realizing the gig is up. And that's where Musk and Trump really, for me, and all of this start to filter back together, is like, there's a growing sentiment in this country that the problem isn't our neighbors, but it's someone else. And we're starting to see the fingers get pointed. And the one direction that actually has traction is towards the boardroom. And this country does not fuck around when we get the scent of blood in the water. We never have. And we also don't do like monarchy or monarchists in this country. We just haven't. Historically, people eventually do what is this smell in the room? Why does it smell this way? And then they start sniffing around and suddenly, there's a full-blown fight over what it actually means to be an American.
Yeah.
And white backlash is only so powerful. Their propaganda is only so powerful.
Beating up the elites has always been a strategy that has worked in this country. It's always been.
And we love it. Are you kidding me? We were founded on it. Like, oh, you sit on a throne? That's great. I'm glad you do that. We don't do that here because I'm hip deep in pig shit. But you know what? That's great that you do that. We're actually going to fight a war about it too, but we want you to know, like, good for you. And that's kind of how we've literally always been. And I don't see this going well for an imposed monarchist vision of like, we're going to do this like the Imperium and I'm going to be the emperor. Like, it just doesn't work out.
No.
Well,
no, it's going to end bad.
It is. And I think this gets to an idea that maybe more people need to realize as to why Trump won. Even the people even the people that voted for him know he is a terrible asshole and a felon and a liar and all of these things. But they've won increasingly based on the reaction to this murder because people are fed up and they want someone who is going to do something about it. And they are going to back the person who is going to affect change. And the reason in that scenario, if you can follow that train of logic, right? The reason Harris didn't win is because she didn't go far enough, because she was too establishment. She was too conservative. We're gonna give you $25,000 to buy a house, but we're not gonna actually go after institutional wealth. We're not actually going to fix anything. Yep. We're gonna put band-aids on it. And Trump promises to burn things down. And well, enough people believed and hoped that his gasoline and his fires would create enough chaos for the powers that be to help them. Now, I think that's completely misguided and wrong and misses the mark in so many ways, but you can understand why people who are hurting and upset and fed up were looking for that and could hear that and think, okay, I can get behind that, or, oh, I'm going to take a flyer on this. So,
oh yeah.
And if we follow all that, we just have to see that when things don't get better, this is going to ramp up and the patience is getting thinner. And eventually, people are going to look at Elon Musk and either he's going to have to go or Trump's going to have to go. Something is going to have to give, and that's where we're heading.
Yeah, and I think, at some level, there's a real misunderstanding in both Trump's view of the election and some of the popular view, which is like both sides suffered from that exact thing you were talking about, right? Like Trump's side capitalized on nothing getting done and an appearance that things, aren't above board, whatever. But then, the thing that damned Harris at the end of the day is she, like you said, didn't offer something that was tangible to most people. And the real way that I've started to look at this at the end of the day is like no one knew what to do because they didn't see, for Democrats, they could not see Trump, rightly so, as a candidate that could and would do anything good. That's one thing. But they also didn't see Harris as being able to either. So when you have a situation where you have less voters than before, you have less enthusiasm, and then you have the other side, which is we're going to do change no matter what that means.
Yeah.
You're in a deep, deep hole already with how the reactions go, because if someone really pushes that, that's a pretty fine balanced amount of chaos. But you push that outside of its bounds and there's
something's got to give.
And you don't know where, when you just don't know where it goes. Like no one will be able to say this is where it goes at that point.
Okay. Boom. I think that's about a good stopping point right there. That would be about 48 minutes,
Seems
50
pretty
minutes
good.
with title cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
How y'all feel about that?
I think it was great.
Yeah, I think it went really well. I can tell it's a new kind of thinking thing for me on how to like actually think through the conversation versus having things kind of more spaced out in my head. But that's
Right.
good.
Okay. Yeah, it felt pretty good. Nobody really
It was hard.
jumped over anybody else.
I think it was hard for us at times to wait for our turn to talk, but I think we all
Yeah.
got some words in, and I don't know. I think we split it up pretty well. I think we did okay.
Yeah,
I mean, if
that felt pretty good.
Yeah, and it felt like there were three distinct things that we talked about.